This video will thoroughly explore Neversoft Spider-Man and contain details such as dancing Spider-Man Easter eggs, trippy boss fights, snippets from an exclusive interview with lead designer Chad Findley, and overall analyze why so many fans consider this game to be such a classic amongst other Spider-Man games. But first, let's begin with where it all started. In 1999, Activision acquired an up-and-coming game development studio called Neversoft Entertainment. Neversoft was set to release the first game in their Tony Hawk Pro Skater series, which would become a major success. But at the time they were looking at other potential titles in addition to it. Originally, this would have been a Star Trek game, but after learning that Activision owned the Spider-Man license, studio head Joel Jewett pushed for the opportunity to create a Spider-Man game. Spider-Man was of course a popular character and had the potential to be another huge hit, but more than just being a popular character, Joel's lead designer Chad Findley was a huge Spider-Man fan and avid comic reader, making him the perfect person to help bring the character to life. Chad was kind enough to sit down with me to chat about the game, so I'll insert clips from our conversation throughout this video. One of the first things we discussed was Chad's passion for the Spider-Man character, and how that influenced Joel's decision to pursue a Spider-Man game.
When Joel found out that Activision had attained the Spider-Man license, he started talking to a few of us, and he found out I was a huge Spider-Man nerd. From the during the 1990s, I probably read every single Spider-Man comic that was out. It's probably near us, Alice and Uncle, frankly. So he's like, I think this could be a bigger one than the Star Trek one, and so he went after it at Activision. He trusted me pretty well as a lead at that point because of the work I did to help them get the last game out, and I just wanted to do it so badly. And I do think we saw a potential higher for recognition on the Spider-Man license versus the Star Trek license too.
I also thought it was interesting seeing both Joel and Chad discuss their interest for the game in an early behind-the-scenes interview around the time of the game's release.
Anybody who's ever given the opportunity to do Spider-Man as a video game, I think they would just snap it up. He is the superhero. The best superhero that you could ever come up with.
Plus, he relates so much to who we were growing up as kids. Having trouble with girls and money, and then also being able to have all these cool powers, be able to swing around, wall crawl, super strength, Spidey sense, the whole thing.
In that same interview, Joel also describes the testing process and how they managed to make the game feel so authentic to Spider-Man.
Testing a video game is a difficult thing to do, but we've learned a lot over the years. For example, on the Tony Hawk game, we've got the professional skaters coming in, helping us with the game, testing it, giving us advice. So on Spider-Man, it's kind of the same thing.
Spidey, I got the new rev for you.
Thanks, Chad. I'll have that bug report for you as soon as possible.
Oh, and Spidey, could you use maybe the front door next time?
Yeah, no problem.
This would also be the first 3D Spider-Man game, which provided technical challenges in figuring out how to bring the character to life in a satisfying way. Neversoft chose to use the same engine that was used for Tony Hawk, and Chad details how that engine only got them so far and required a lot of customization for Spider-Man.
We had the rendering engine from Tony Hawk and a little bit of control, and we just ripped out everything else. And then, we added the web swinging, we added the web shooting, we added the wall crawling, we added a fighting engine, a whole new fighting engine. On top of that, a walking engine,
Wow.
Tony couldn't walk at the time. The new control system, a new camera system, that one's a tough one. A camera control system for a guy that can crawl on walls. And sometimes in that first level when the camera goes above him wall crawling on the ceiling for the banks. A triggering an event system, an AI system. We didn't have any AI for Tony Hawk, so we had to write a new AI system, and then a bunch of smaller systems, UI and save modes and all that kind of stuff. So it was a lot of new things that had to get created for this thing.
Despite these challenges, the game was ready to release in the year 2000 after roughly 18 months of development. The game was received well by critics, and even 20 plus years after its initial release, is still considered to be a classic amongst fans. So from here, we'll next take a more detailed walk through the game and discuss everything that makes it so special, as well as how it holds up today. For some background context before we get started, the gameplay clips you'll see throughout this video come from the PS1 version of the game, emulated on PC using the DuckStation emulator. I decided to play it this way since it allowed me to upscale the graphics a bit and widen the field of view, hopefully making it a little cleaner for modern displays without sacrificing much of its originality. I also want to clarify one common misconception before we get started, and it's that this game is based on Spider-Man the Animated Series. The marketing for the game definitely leads you to believe that, with trailers showing clips of the show spliced in with the gameplay. However, the game is based on the comics and not the show, and I made sure to double check that with Chad.
I didn't even remember those things, and I probably didn't even like those things when they came out. That was really marketing, and I think it was to get people who weren't like comic Spidey fans to get excited about it. And the main Spidey voice is kind of similar. Rino Romano did a great job, kind of like but that was his version of it. And maybe there was a little bit of aping of the cartoon, but no, it was like literally like it was just the way I saw it in the comics is the way I wanted it.
This will also be the first video in a Symbiote series of games on the channel, in anticipation of Spider-Man 2 potentially releasing later this year. So keep an eye out for other Symbiote and Venom-related retrospectives coming out in the future, and you can subscribe to stay up to date on those. If you enjoyed this video, you can also give it a like, which helps out the channel more than you'd think. But anyway, let's begin by walking through the story itself, and discuss what Neversoft gave us with their Spider-Man game.
Technology is the light that will cut through the darkness. When humanity conforms to a single truth, a truth based in technological progress and scientific method, we will be unstoppable. I, Dr. Otto Octavius, vow as a scientist and businessman that my duties to humankind will be fulfilled. Thank you.
We begin the story at a science convention where Dr. Otto Octavius gives a speech regarding some new tech that he's invented. In the audience is Peter Parker, who isn't as enthusiastic about the speech as the rest of the crowd, since he knows that Octavius is truly the criminal Dr. Octopus. Also in the crowd is Eddie Brock, who states that he hopes his photos of the event will get his career back on track. In the comics, Eddie's career went off the rails while employed as a journalist at the Daily Globe, when he began writing articles claiming to be in contact with a serial killer named Sin Eater. Brock would interview Sin Eater as an exclusive for the paper, and at one point even betray Sin Eater by revealing his identity in an article. Unbeknownst to Eddie though, the person he was in contact with was only pretending to be Sin Eater for attention, and the world found out when Spider-Man caught the real Sin Eater. This was an embarrassment for both Eddie and the Daily Globe, getting him fired and ruining his reputation, as well as beginning his hatred towards Peter Parker Spider-Man. So Eddie seems to have transitioned to photography here and hopes to get some solid pictures to regain his reputation. He'll actually get an opportunity at better photos than he expected, as the event is interrupted by none other than Spider-Man attempting to commit a robbery. This is clearly an imposter since Peter Parker is currently in the audience, but Peter gets stuck in the chaos of the crowd before he can don his spider suit and expose the imposter. In all the commotion, Peter and Eddie even briefly run into each other, but Eddie doesn't immediately recognize Peter in this moment, and is instead too focused on nabbing pictures of Spider-Man in hopes of selling them to Spider-Man hater J. Jonah Jameson, editor-in-chief of the Daily Bugle. On stage, Spider-Man is stealing Octavius' technology, and Eddie is able to get a few photos of it before the imposter notices him and destroys his camera.
See you, chump. What the hell?
The imposter then runs off with the stolen tech, leaving Eddie Brock to wallow in self-pity.
It's all over! I blew it again! I can hear Jameson's voice already.
Brock, you loser! If I had given a real photographer that job, I would finally have the evidence to send Spider-Man away forever! You're through, Brock! When I am done with you, you won't be able to get a job taking wedding pictures in Siberia!
I tried to fight it. I can't fight it anymore! Again, innocence falls prey to the evil of Spider-Man. Rest easy, Brock. Venom is here. And if it's the last thing we ever do, Jameson and the insect are gonna pay.
We then cut to Octavius, who's back in his laboratory with the villain Carnage. Octavius tells Carnage that they will now initiate Phase 2 of their plan, which is to release a gas throughout the city. We'll learn later why this is part of Oc's plan, but the meta reason is that it saved the developers processing power and time by not having to render a full city. But as the gas covers the city, we can hear Carnage's psychotic laughter, and I love how maniacal he sounds. We're then taken into our first level of the game, which is narrated by Stan Lee.
Welcome, true believers and newcomers alike. Spider-Man co-creator Stan Lee here. Once again, we find our hero Peter Parker, better known around the world as the Amazing Spider-Man, in a heap of trouble. But this is just the beginning, Spidey fans. So get ready for a true superhero action thriller, packed to the brim with thrills and chills, twists and turns, more supervillains than you can shake a web at, and of course, non-stop web-slinging, wall-crawling action.
This opening monologue by Stan was actually written by Chad Findley, who aimed to replicate Stan's written voice from the comics as accurately as possible. Chad also got to voice direct Stan Lee, and during our interview, he recalls that day and how Stan even made fun of him a bit.
Came in, drove it in his burgundy Jag, and came in and was super nice right from the get-go. And then I can't remember the exact verbiage of the first line, but that welcome true believers, and then it's like a 30-second long line. He read it once. He's like, "Who wrote this?" Kind of making fun of it a little bit because I ate so hard from Excelsior and all that. But he was amazing. I'll never forget that day. It was awesome. He was fantastic.
As we enter the first level of the game, Spider-Man is immediately greeted by Black Cat, who acts as an ally and tutorial giver to Spider-Man. At this time in the game and comics, Peter Parker is married to Mary Jane, so Black Cat has been forced into the friend zone for the time being. I also found it interesting that Black Cat is missing her mask from the comics, even though in early prototype footage she's seen wearing it. I asked Chad about this, and it seems it just didn't look good, so they scrapped it.
Remember what I'm guessing, because it probably looked like shite in PlayStation 1 pixels at a distance. I think it probably just looked like a crumble of darkness on her eye at distance and probably even close up. Getting faces to look good. I remember that part was really tough on the PlayStation 1, especially with our RAM, our VRAM requirements and trying to fit everything into memory at the time. The faces were oh man, can we get this any smaller? But it looks so bad. And so I think it just looked bad with just black crumble on her.
I didn't ask Chad about this, but I wonder if their struggles with faces is why we mostly see Black Cat from the back or from the side in these early levels. Nevertheless, Black Cat informs Spider-Man that a robbery is in progress at a nearby bank and that he should go stop the criminals. Along the way, we'll learn the basics of Spider-Man's gameplay as he traverses the rooftops to get to the bank. Keep in mind that even though this isn't the first ever Spider-Man game, it is the first three-dimensional Spider-Man game, so Neversoft had the challenge of essentially developing the blueprint for what a Spider-Man game should feel like. One of the biggest challenges was getting Spider-Man's web swinging to feel natural. Originally, the team developed a system where the player could manually aim Spider-Man's web line, a feature that is still present in the game. However, this method wasn't as fluid as they'd hoped.
Yeah, in my mind, when we first started designing it, I was like, yeah, and then you use the thing to aim and shoot and swing, and then aim and shoot and swing, and that's easy to say, but when you're actually doing it, being able to use a crosshairs to swing at the next thing while you're in mid-swing is impossible. So we got that done, and that was still usable as far as mechanics of once we know where we want to swing, we just remove the crosshair and we use that point. Mm-hmm. But then we tried to play it, it was just not fun, and so we're well, we need to make this more automatic, and so I worked with Dave Cowling, the lead programmer, and started working on ways for it to automatically guess what you were trying to swing towards based on what was it'd fire out a bunch of rays to figure out what's out there and then choose whatever it thinks you were trying to swing for.
Chad would further go on to describe that this new web swinging mechanic was difficult to program, since it's essentially guessing where it thinks the player is trying to swing to, but in my playthrough, I found it to be surprisingly accurate, at least for the majority of the time. I was also surprised at the depth of the combat, as well as how much Spider-Man can utilize his webbing. The player can choose to have Spider-Man either perform a combo of punches or kicks, or even jump on an enemy's shoulders and beat on their head. The webbing provides the most versatility though. For example, you can tie up enemies with a standard web line, or you can fire damaging web bullets at them. Spider-Man can even increase the damage of his punches by creating web gloves on his fists, or he can take a more defensive approach by surrounding himself in a web dome to block attacks, and then burst out of it to damage enemies in the surrounding area. As you get more advanced, you can also pull enemies around with your web line, which was pretty enjoyable. While you're making your way through the bank though, you'll also encounter a few fun Easter eggs. The first is a billboard for a radio show doing a feature on the criminal Cletus Cassidy, a serial killer who's bonded to the Carnage symbiote. Carnage is easily one of the most vicious villains in Spider-Man's rogues gallery. In his first appearance, Cletus Cassidy is in prison, sharing a cell with Eddie Brock. Cletus is serving 11 consecutive life sentences and plans on killing Eddie to make it an even dozen. Before he gets the chance though, the Venom symbiote returns and busts him out of prison. One important detail about symbiotes is that they reproduce asexually, and during this prison break, the Venom symbiote essentially gave birth to a new symbiote, which was left in the cell with Cletus Cassidy. The symbiote then bonded to Cletus, together becoming Carnage, a pair that have an insatiable appetite for murder. Their first kill was a prison guard who they gruesomely pulled through the bars of their cell. Their next victim was a man named Gunny Stein, who they murdered after finding his name in a phone book and deciding he had the dumbest name. Carnage has since gone on more murderous rampages, especially in the series Maximum Carnage, but you get the idea. Unfortunately for Spider-Man, we'll later come face to face with Carnage further into the game. Before that though, we can find another fun Easter egg, which you might have noticed during Stan Lee's opening monologue. That's the Fantastic Four's headquarters, the Baxter Building. If you swing over to it, Spidey will comment on it.
Man, looks like the Fantastic Four aren't around right now.
Believe it or not, you can actually interact with a member of the Fantastic Four in this area, so this is probably a good time to mention the game's What If mode that can be accessed through the cheat menu. By the way, if you're unfamiliar with the title What If, it was a comic series where Marvel would explore fun ideas that wouldn't fit in with their canon comics line. For example, what if Loki found Thor's hammer, or what if Captain America had been elected president, or what if Uncle Ben lived. Each of these stories are also introduced by the character Uatu the Watcher, who has the ability to see alternate universes and where their paths diverge. In the What If game mode for Neversoft Spider-Man, you'll play through the same storyline but with various changes, which we'll thoroughly explore throughout this video. To help differentiate the two gameplays, I also have Spider-Man wearing the black symbiote suit in What If mode, and we'll discuss alternate suits in more detail later in the video. On theme with the comics, Uatu the Watcher himself even appears and introduces us to the new mode.
I am the Watcher. You already know the outcome of Spider-Man's battle with Dr. Octopus, Carnage, and the symbiotes. But what if? What if this time, in this time stream, some of the events unfolded differently? Some of the differences are grand, some minute. Those of you alert enough may notice some of the differences yourself.
One of the first subtle changes is that one of the buildings that was originally blank now says Neversoft on it. Even better is when we head back to the Baxter Building, this time we'll be able to talk with the Human Torch.
Sorry we can't help you, Spidey, but we're taking care of Mole Man. If you do need help, meet me at the usual spot later.
The usual spot that Human Torch is referring to is the Statue of Liberty, which is the location where they'll meet up and chat both in the comics and later in the game. For now though, we'll return back to the main game as Spider-Man breaks into the bank to stop the robbers. Now that we're on the inside, we're faced against gun-toting criminals patrolling the bank. Even worse is that these criminals have hostages, urging the player to take a more stealthy approach. If you decide to take a more head-on approach though and fail to subdue the enemies in time, the hostages will be shot and phase out of existence. So ideally, you web zip up to the ceiling and subdue enemies from above. At one point, you're meant to hit switches that open up doors to another room, releasing more guards and hostages. In the normal story mode, you'll just progress into the next room, but in What If mode, you'll be rewarded for investigating the room that the hostages ran out of. Inside, you'll find a square platform, and if you stand on it, Spider-Man will use it to breakdance. Yeah, you didn't know Spidey had moves like that, did you? Continuing on though, eventually you'll reach the vault where there are multiple henchmen guarding a couple of hostages. They realize that something's up, so they set up a bomb to detonate in 2 minutes. This becomes a mini time trial and puzzle where you have to quickly figure out how to dispose of the bomb while also subduing the guards before they kill the hostages. The solution is to open the vault door and throw the bomb into it, which admittedly is pretty simple, but as a kid I remember this being pretty hair-raising. In What If mode, you'll find some graffiti on the walls of the vault reading, "Hans was here," which I assumed was a nod to a member of the Neversoft team, but it's actually a reference to Hans Gruber from Die Hard. But with the hostages saved and the criminals subdued, Spider-Man swings away from the scene. Spider-Man won't get much of a break though, as later that night, more trouble rears its head.
Jonah, I have shot to the bank robbery.
Parker, shut up and dial 911. Scorpion's here, and you have to...
You might be wondering why Scorpion would be after Jonah in the first place. Well, in the comics, it's actually Jonah who's responsible for the Scorpion's existence. It all started when Jonah hired a man named Matt Gargan to secretly follow Peter Parker in hopes of discovering how Peter always manages to get such incredible photos of Spider-Man. However, Peter was constantly able to evade Gargan, making the whole attempt a failure. Jonah lost interest in tailing Peter though when he learned of a scientist named Dr. Farley Stillwell. Stillwell had successfully mutated a rat to swim like a fish, and a fish to breathe air like a rat, which gave Jonah an idea. He decided to pay Stillwell to experiment on a human for him, and also pay Gargan to be the subject of the experiment. Jonah's goal was to create a superpowered being that could finally defeat Spider-Man. Stillwell decided to mutate Gargan's DNA with that of a scorpion, since scorpions are natural predators of spiders. The experiment was ultimately a success, granting Gargan superhuman strength, and Stillwell even built him a tail to complete the look. However, the experiment wasn't a complete success, since as a side effect it started to deteriorate Gargan's mind. Scorpion became increasingly insane over time, and developed a hatred for Jonah, who he blamed for turning him into a freak. Scorpion also states that he's trapped in his suit, and blames Jameson for that as well. With Scorpion already in Jameson's office, Spider-Man has to quickly swing over to the Daily Bugle. This puts the player in a time trial where you have to reach the Daily Bugle before Scorpion can kill Jonah. One detail I like is that Neversoft didn't just put a countdown clock at the top of the screen. Instead, there's a meter that shows how close Scorpion is to Jameson. As Scorpion gets closer, you'll also get some dialogue between them.
Get away, Gargan!
Your time is running out!
In What If mode, they yell Marco Polo at each other.
Marco
Polo!
While we're on the topic of What If mode, you can also briefly see Ghost Rider drive his motorcycle down a building, which is pretty awesome. In my interview with Chad, I asked him how the idea of What If mode came to be and why they chose to put certain characters like Ghost Rider in there.
We got to the point where our base core game was basically alpha locked. And when I submitted the initial list of characters that we might want to use to Marvel, it was huge. It was 50 characters long. Because I was we didn't know the story we wanted to make, and I was let's try. And I don't know if they said no to any of them. I can't remember. Wow. And if they did, it was just one or two of them. And so we finished the story, and we still had 30 characters that we didn't have use for. And so we're wow, it's a shame to not use this. And we're trying to do things for Spidey, for comic fans, put the comic books in the levels that have the covers, and the different versions of Spidey that you could play, Amazing Bagman and the silver suit and all that kind of stuff. And so we're there are a lot of games that do second time through, it's different. And I was oh, what about Uatu, the Watcher? What if he's there? He's what if this happened? And so it was just a way to I was all right, guys, you only have this amount of time. This is the list of characters that we got. If you can get them into there and get it done bug free, we'll put it in. And we just started shoving things in where we could, just because we loved all the characters. So.
That's so awesome.
So as you can imagine from that interview snippet, there are plenty more characters that we'll see in the game at its different modes. Speaking of which, on our way to save Jonah, we can find a reference to another Marvel superhero, Iron Man. This billboard is for Stark Solutions, a company that Tony Stark created when Stark Industries was acquired by Fujikawa Industries after a time when Stark was presumed dead. Before we get to the Daily Bugle though, I was also curious to see what happens if you let Scorpion catch Jameson, and it was definitely worth the wait.
Time's up.
No, Gargan! No!
But once we actually make it to the Bugle in time to save Jonah, we're in for our first boss fight of the game against Scorpion. He's no joke either and is a pretty tough first battle. He's quick, has a lot of range thanks to his tail, and hits incredibly hard. So hard that Spider-Man will need a few seconds to recover after being hit. With all that strength, an up-close brawl can be tricky to pull off, especially since he can easily follow up your 3-hit combo with a powerful punch. Although I found if you can get the timing right, you can stun lock him a bit with your webs. You're not safe up high either, since Scorpion will use electric blasts from his tail to zap you from afar. Ultimately, I found that ranged attacks proved to be the most effective, either by firing web bullets or launching Jameson's furniture at him, the latter being the most satisfying to pull off. Not only do you have to worry about Scorpion though, but also safeguarding Jameson, who is running around the Bugle trying to hide from Scorpion. There aren't many places to hide though, so it's pretty funny to see Jameson hiding behind some shrubbery. Occasionally, Scorpion will focus his attention on finding Jameson, destroying whatever he's hiding behind for an opportunity to strike. Overall, I thought this was a really fun boss fight. Overcoming Scorpion's strength and finding openings for attacks was a fun challenge, and I enjoyed the added element of trying to protect Jameson while he hid around the office. It also closely resembled Scorpion's Bugle attacks in the comics, which I thought was a nice touch as well. However, you may notice in these comic panels that Scorpion is in his classic green outfit, while the game chose to use the newer blue and green suit. Originally, Neversoft did plan on using the classic outfit for Scorpion in the game, and early prototype images from the channel Solid Snake 11, which I'll have linked in the description, even show Scorpion wearing it. When I asked Chad about their decision to swap Scorpion's suit, he had this to say.
I think it was, and I'm glad we did the change. I think I wanted the green one because I'm like a die-hard Spidey fan, and I like having the stuff the way it, like the classic version of things. But I remember we did a version of the green version, and our art director was like, "Hey Chad, I think this would read better if it was the other version, and I think it would pop better if it was the other version." And read better, I mean like you understand which angle he's at. He's not just a glob of green that kind of like you have a hard time telling which direction he's facing and what poses he has and where his hands are, and where his legs are, and all that kind of stuff. When you add those blue, like more hard-edged things to it, definitely read him better. And then also it does pop better, like visually, like I saw those pictures of the green. It looks like just like a green blob of stuff. And you can read where the tail is and all that kind of stuff. And so that was definitely a correct decision, I believe, on that. If we were doing a next-gen version of it or a current-gen version of it now, I think I might push back for the green because we can get more subtleties to show up crisper and all that kind of stuff. But then with the PS1, I think that was absolutely the right decision to make.
The blue and green suit was also a newer suit, debuting roughly a year before the game released, so it makes sense that using a newer suit that stands out more would be a better choice for the game, although I can't help but wish the classic Scorpion suit had been an alternate cheat code outfit you could activate for him or something like that. Still, this boss fight was great, and I think the team did an excellent job on it. By the way, there's also a fun Easter egg hidden in the background of the fight as well, since on Jameson's TV you can vaguely see Tony Hawk's Pro Skater playing on it. I never knew Jameson was a fan of skating. But after defeating Scorpion and saving Jameson's life, he's still just as ungrateful as ever.
I don't know what you're trying to pull by saving my life, but it won't work.
Oh, you're just too clever for me, JJ.
There he is, officers! The man behind the Science Expo heist! Shoot him now! Shoot him!
JJ, you are out of the wheel! I mean it this time!
If you're curious about what Jameson does in the aftermath of the battle, the comics give us a good idea of what likely happened. After Spider-Man and Scorpion are gone, Jameson is secretly thankful that all of the furniture is destroyed since he's been wanting to replace it for quite a while, and now the insurance money will cover new ones. He also decides to call in reporters to interview him and frame himself as the hero of the battle, claiming to have saved his employees from 2 costumed criminals. So yeah, Jameson's fine. As Spider-Man swings away from the Daily Bugle though, we get another really awesome cameo appearance from another superhero.
Hold it, Spider-Man. I don't want to believe that you pulled off the heist today, but I've got to make sure.
Daredevil, I haven't got time to explain.
Just tell me your side of it. I'll know if you're lying.
How am I supposed to know you're the real Daredevil?
What?
Listen, it's true. A Spider-Man made off with Octavius' new invention, but not the Spider-Man, not me. Somebody's framed me. Why? I don't know yet. And if New York's finest catch me, it may be too late.
Well, then you'd better get going. NYPD is coming fast.
That's it? You believe me?
I don't have to believe you. I know you aren't lying.
But how?
Let's just say you've got your superpowers, and I've got mine. I'll spread the word about your innocence. Not that it'll help with the cops. Good luck.
Since when have I had any? Uh-oh.
If you're unfamiliar with the character, Daredevil is a blind superhero whose other senses are superhumanly heightened. Due to his enhanced hearing, he could tell Spider-Man was telling the truth by listening to his heartbeat, and I thought that was a really cool detail to include. Seeing him swing away almost makes me wish he was a playable character too, although he was actually set to get his own game for the PS2 not long after this game released. It was in development from a studio called 5,000 Feet and published by Encore, but unfortunately was cancelled. There's still some gameplay clips floating around showing some of the combat and Daredevil's ability to traverse the city. It looked like it would have been a really cool game, so it's a shame it never made it to release. Continuing on though, Spider-Man is ambushed by an attack helicopter, something Daredevil surely must have heard approaching in the distance but neglected to mention. Regardless, this leads to a chase scene that puts your traversal reflexes to the test. As you attempt to flee the helicopter, you'll also have to dodge its incoming missiles, as well as police officers stationed on the rooftops. Along the way, there is a fun billboard for a donut shop called Pork and Donuts, a twist on the company Dunkin' Donuts, as well as a joke on cops who are often referred to as pigs and love donuts. There's also the line about New York City's finest, which is another phrase used to describe the city's police. In What If mode, there are even more fun inclusions. To start, as you begin to flee the attack chopper, you can spot a billboard for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, another Neversoft game. If you crawl on the billboard, Spider-Man will comment on it.
Tony Hawk! Hey, I skated with that guy.
He's not lying either, since this is a reference to Spider-Man being a playable skater in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Another cool difference here is a blimp that seems to be calling out to Spider-Man. You can actually swing onto it, which takes you to a different level. You'll next find yourself riding the blimp when Silver Surfer randomly flies past you. He's no help though, and you're still left to evade the attack chopper while being stuck on the blimp. The attacks from the chopper cause the blimp to lose altitude, and if you survive long enough, Spider-Man will eventually jump to a nearby building, and this acts as a shortcut to the next part of the level. While you're on the building, your only option is to climb to the top of it, but along the way you'll find some interesting advertisements on the side, and Spider-Man will comment on some of them as well. The first one advertises an interview with Wolverine.
Anything on TV nowadays.
There's also a radio station advertising the Hulk, and further up is an ad for the Jeffrey Swinger Show featuring Captain America. This is a riff on the real-life television personality Jerry Springer, and during his shows, his audience will often chant his name. Spider-Man will actually replicate this when you pass by the billboard.
Jeffrey! Jeffrey! Jeffrey!
Lastly is a billboard for the Fantastic Four going on tour this summer. But once we reach the top of the building, the pursuit continues. Interestingly, one of the billboards ahead of us has a smiling pumpkin graffitied onto it, which is a tease for the next hidden Easter egg in the area. A bit further into the chase, you'll find a crane with another pumpkin painted on it, and a hole in the roof. If you go inside, you'll find a hideout for the Green Goblin, and Spider-Man will comment on it.
Gee, I wonder who those pumpkin bombs belong to.
You can also collect a gold spider token, which grants you the metallic spider armor. This is an outfit from the comics, and in the game, it gives you an extra layer of defense. Looking around Goblin's hideout some more, we can find some fun details. To start, the pumpkins on the shelf are meant to be pumpkin bombs. In the movies, Goblin is usually throwing some kind of high-tech grenade, but in the comics, Goblin would throw pumpkin bombs at his enemies, which also explains all the pumpkin imagery around this level. Speaking of which, we can also see a poster of Spider-Man with a pumpkin over his face, as well as the words haha written at the bottom of it in red, suggesting that Spider-Man is still Goblin's #1 target. On another wall is also a drawing of Goblin's classic glider, another fun nod to the character. After leaving Goblin's hideout, we'll continue our escape through the city when we come across another interesting billboard. This time a newspaper headline regarding monsters living in the sewers.
Monsters infest sewers.
Yeah, right. This is of course a reference to Spider-Man villain the Lizard, and despite Spidey's disbelief, this is some fun foreshadowing to a future level. A little bit further up is another Easter egg billboard, this time for Roxxon Oil, a company from the comics that often has criminal ties. Eventually, our chase will conclude when the attack chopper accidentally collides with a tower and crashes to the ground. Coincidentally, Black Cat reappears to give us some troubling news. She informs us that Rhino is on a rampage at a company called Omnitech, and that Venom has been broadcasting a message to Spider-Man on the Jumbotron in Times Square. Spider-Man decides to watch Venom's broadcast first before dealing with Rhino.
The Venom Marathon continues on the biggest TV in New York. We're shouting out to the whole big rotten apple here, people.
Sad thing is, he'll probably get his own talk show for this.
So we've got this beautiful redhead. You know her. She's one of those famous bimbos. We have decided that this poor little lassie has 24 hours to live. 24 hours! Oh, by the way, her name is Mary Jane Parker.
No, Mary Jane?
So, just in case someone, I don't know who it could be, if any of you type-wearing freaks out there want to save little Miss Fashion Model, then bring it on! Meanwhile, New Yorkers, the Venom Marathon will continue!
Listen, I realize what this means. Forget about helping me with Omnitech. I can handle Rhino.
Rhino by yourself? Thanks, Cat, but no thanks. Look, being Spider-Man has given me a lot and taken a lot away, but one thing never changes. My responsibility to use my powers for others before myself, no matter what the cost. There are innocent people at Omnitech, and they need our help right now. I won't let them down. Then I'll stop Venom. And this time, it's for the last time.
I found a couple details interesting during that cutscene, one of which is that Venom chose to kidnap Mary Jane as a way to provoke Peter. In the comics, after Peter ditched the symbiote and it bonded with Eddie Brock, Eddie was able to learn everything the symbiote knew about Spider-Man, most importantly, his secret identity as Peter Parker. In Venom's first appearance in the comics, he actually intimidates Mary Jane as a way to instigate Peter by hiding in their apartment. An important thing to mention is that after Peter ditched the symbiote, Black Cat actually made Peter a non-alien cloth black suit for him to continue wearing, which he did. So when Mary Jane first sees Venom in the shadows, she assumes that it's Peter in his black suit. She's then horrified when she learns that the figure in the shadows is actually the monstrous Venom, who threatens her and leaves. Mary Jane is so traumatized by the encounter that she requests Peter destroy his black suit because it reminds her too much of that scare from Venom. Venom ultimately hadn't intended on running into MJ at the apartment and just used the moment to his advantage, but I think it demonstrates that this isn't exactly out of character for Venom to use MJ as a way to provoke Peter. I also like the moment where Black Cat offers to handle Rhino for Peter while he takes on Venom, but Peter strongly refuses. In the comics, Black Cat often wants to fight side by side with Peter, but it doesn't always work out. Black Cat is underpowered compared to Spider-Man and many of his foes, making her more of an interference in battles. For example, Hobgoblin attacking her as a way to slow down Spider-Man, giving him an opportunity to escape. Spider-Man recognizes that having Black Cat around during fights can be a risk to both of their lives, and prevents him from capturing villains when he otherwise would have. This was such a rift between Spider-Man and Black Cat that she secretly underwent treatments to gain superpowers, which she didn't know were being funded by the Kingpin. She ended up with enhanced strength and agility, but more notably the passive ability to give her enemies bad luck during fights. For example, weapons slipping out of their hands and hitting their ally, or accidentally shooting a telephone pole which causes debris to break their gun. Black Cat's powers have shifted around throughout various comics, but Peter viewing Black Cat as a liability was consistent, so I like how that was hinted at in this cutscene. So in the end, Black Cat and Spider-Man decide to team up and take down Rhino first. It seems that waiting to watch Venom's Jumbotron message slowed them down too much, since by the time they arrive at Omnitech, helicopters are already flying away with stolen tech. However, Peter's decision to not let Black Cat fight alone was proven correct almost immediately, as Rhino introduces himself by knocking her out. This begins our boss fight against him, and pretty early on I found that he's very durable to normal attacks, and fighting him head-on wasn't a smart strategy. What you're meant to do is use the arena to your advantage by tricking him to run into things. For example, these power generators in the center of the map, which give him quite the electric shock. It's also funny how Rhino's health bar picture goes bug-eyed while he's being electrocuted. The boss fight in itself is ultimately very simple, but running him into generators and explosive barrels was really satisfying and made the fight a lot of fun. I wouldn't say this boss fight was overly easy either. Rhino's stampede is very fast once he begins his sprint, which kept me on my toes as I attempted to evade him. Sometimes he'd charge up and begin his sprint faster than prior sprints too, which helped to add to the tension. So overall, I thought this was a really effective boss fight, and one of my favorites in the game. Interestingly though, this boss fight could have looked much different. In some early designs for the game, the level looked more intricate, and in our interview, Chad described why they ultimately went with a more simplistic Rhino fight.
The design wasn't working, and I think I could have got it to work. Like, you kind of saw in that video, like you're up high looking down on the Rhino, and then you were trying to get him to do kind of the same stuff, but you're doing it from different angles. But it was too high up, and there were too many segments, and it would have taken like weeks to like even just get something that was like comprehensively playable. Like bosses are really hard to design. To get them to be understand and not frustrating and not confusing, and like, you know, like you want to like die 3 times before you start getting like maximum 3 times before you start getting, oh, I know what to do, you know. And this one where it was getting too weird on like what to do, so we just said, you know, and I think my boss Joel probably was like, "Chow, we gotta simplify this, cut it down, make it simple." And I think he got it and said, "Just do one room with this," and I was like, "All right." And I probably cried, you know. But I think it was honestly the right decision, because, you know, like I've done bosses before that in other games that have been like too complex and just never ended up working, and I wish I would have, you know, keep it simple, stupid, you know.
The original Rhino fight they had planned certainly sounds more ambitious, and I would have liked to have seen it come to fruition, but as it stands, I think the boss fight we received was a successful one. But after defeating Rhino, Spider-Man is forced to keep a low profile as the police arrive. Surprisingly, Dr. Octavius is there to help retrieve Rhino. Peter then switches back to his normal clothes in an attempt to get close to Black Cat as she's being taken away by paramedics. As she's being loaded into the vehicle, she tries to give him a warning.
Peter, you gotta help me. You're not really paramedic.
Perfect.
Peter doesn't catch the hint and instead decides to reach out to a friend for advice.
Well, that's my story, Johnny.
Looks like you're in a lot of trouble. You'll find Venom.
But how? Venom is invisible to my spider sense.
Knowing your luck, Venom will find you. Have faith, Spidey.
Where could she be? Gotta find her. Got no choice.
Where, what a wuss. Hey, wanna race? Parker hates it when I get the drop on him.
I hate it when he gets the drop on me.
This leads to a level where we have to chase Venom to his hideout, which is a little trickier than expected due to the controls. The game doesn't always accurately interpret where you're trying to swing, so you'll be fighting that as well as the camera, and small errors can lead to Venom getting some quick distance on you. There's still some fun moments within it though, like the moment Venom decides to run through a building.
Look out, lady.
Oh my goodness!
Out of my way, nerd! Watch that first step, Parker. It's a doozy.
Oh, toe, ow! Ow, my head!
Look out, lady.
Oh my goodness!
Oh, sorry, lady. Didn't see a thing.
In What If mode, the building Venom crashes through is a gym, leading to some even better comments within it.
Welcome to 12-Hour Fitness, where fitness is our specialty.
1 and 2 and 1 and 2. Hey, that's the ladies' locker room, Venom.
This is a private spa.
Lady, put a towel on.
Hey, my eyes are closed.
Hey, nice biceps.
Thank you.
Eventually, we'll catch up to Venom, who eggs us on for a fight in an alleyway. In the alley, there are two immediate details that I want to mention. The first is the sign for the Hellfire Club behind Venom. This is another reference to the comics, and the Hellfire Club are an elitist group of mutants whose inner circle typically contains the high-ranking members Emma Frost and Sebastian Shaw. The other thing I want to discuss briefly is Venom's cloaking ability shown here and throughout this boss fight. It may seem strange at first, but this is actually an ability of his in the comics. The symbiote has the ability to camouflage itself into the surrounding area, essentially turning Venom invisible. Pairing that with Venom's immunity to Peter's spider sense, you can see why Peter is so paranoid that Venom could be anywhere at any time stalking him, and this boss fight does a good job of simulating that feeling here for the player. I thought this boss fight was really cool for that reason too, since Venom will disappear and then reappear in random places, often catching me by surprise. Trying to attack him in a straight up fight proved ineffective as well, and Venom was even deadly at a range, able to pull me close with his webbing to deal some damage. Like with Scorpion, your best option is to use your webbing against him when the opportunity arises. Overall, I thought this was a good opening boss fight for Venom. It displayed his abilities and proved why he's such a threat to Peter, while also not being too overwhelming of a fight for the player. This was just a warm-up for him though, since after dealing enough damage, Venom will dive deep into the sewers to lure us further into his trap. As we pursue Venom deeper into the sewers, Spider-Man learns almost immediately that the reports of sewer lizards were correct, and they'll be our primary enemy type for a while. After navigating the sewers more, we'll eventually come across Venom on the subway, so we'll jump on the roof of it to continue our pursuit. Also on the train is a never-ending supply of lizard henchmen, so our goal for this level is to survive until we reach our destination. The lizard enemies are pretty tough and can deal a good amount of damage, so I found this to be another challenging level. Still, I thought it was a lot of fun trying to knock all the lizards off the train and hold them off to the best of my ability. It's definitely a very fast-paced and tense level, and easily one of the most memorable ones in my opinion. As the subway whizzes through the different stations, there are a couple more advertisements you can spot along the way as well. One of course is another ad for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, but I thought it was interesting that the second one is just a poster of the lizard fighting Spider-Man. Perhaps a little foreshadowing to an idea Neversoft had for this level, but we'll discuss that more in a bit. There are more Easter eggs in What If mode here as well, but this time in Venom's voiceover as he taunts you.
Pop quiz, hotshot. You're on a speeding subway with mutant lizard men raining down on you. What do you do? What do you do?
This line is a nod to the movie Speed, and Dennis Hopper says this to Keanu Reeves' character.
Quiz, hotshot. There's a bomb on a bus. Once the bus goes 50 miles an hour, the bomb is armed. If it drops below 50, it blows up. What do you do? What do you do?
After surviving the waves of lizard men, Venom reappears and throws Peter off the train, sending him deeper into the sewer. Peter's then greeted by more lizard men, and we're forced to further navigate these sewers in an attempt to find Venom and Mary Jane. This ends up being a much more puzzle-focused area, for example, trying to hit switches in the proper order to open a path to Venom. During the same puzzle, as an added challenge in What If mode, the water draining down the sewer is replaced with molten lava. The puzzle that I found the most fun though, was when you're forced to explore a maze of tunnels to find Venom. You'll find branching pathways that all look the same, but Venom will help you find your way by playing hot and cold.
Warmer? Starting to sweat here, Parker? Not so fast.
There's also a really awesome Easter egg during one of the early incorrect paths, since one will lead you to a locked up villain, the actual lizard, Dr. Kirk Connors, who you get some brief dialogue with.
The lizard! I knew it.
Spider-Man! Venom has imprisoned me and has taken my lair. Now he's using my lizard man against you.
No.
He's also imprisoned that Parker woman.
Where is she?
She's in the lair at the end of the maze. Go back along this tunnel and cross over 2 waterways. Then, go right at the next one.
Yeah, there's no way I'm remembering all those directions, but it's really cool to see the lizard in person during this level. During my interview with Chad, he also mentioned that he originally had bigger plans for the lizard, who he wanted to be a boss fight at the end of the level.
Most of the bosses didn't cut down much. Like, I think Mysterio might have got a little bit of cut. Lizard got cut out completely as a boss.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, he was supposed to be at the end of the sewer systems as a boss, and then due to time, we had to cut him out as a boss. And he just made a cameo.
Chad wasn't able to recall the specifics of what the boss fight would have looked like, aside from wanting the lizard to fight you alongside his henchmen. It's too bad they didn't have time to include this, since it sounds like it could have been a pretty intense boss fight and a surprise finale to the level. There's still one more boss fight in this level though, and that's our final confrontation with Venom. He's led us to the room where he's holding Mary Jane captive, and we can see he's left her dangling in a water tank. He flips a switch to begin filling the tank with water, and we're on to our final showdown against Venom. Like in our first battle against him, he'll camouflage himself and hide around the room, reappearing in random places. It's pretty tense searching the room for him, and there were plenty of moments that he'd surprise me for an attack. Between Spider-Man and Venom is also a battle for the switch, as you both turn the water on and off when given the opportunity. Mary Jane will yell throughout the fight as well, attempting to alert you when Venom switches the water back on, or when you accidentally turn it on yourself.
Mary Jane, hold her breath.
The switch! Turn off the switch!
In What If mode, she's a lot more aggressive about it.
The switch, you idiot! Turn off the switch!
Overall, I like this boss fight a lot. Having Venom stalk you throughout the fight made it very tense, and I enjoyed having to react quickly to Venom's reappearance to prevent him from attacking. I think the tug of war between the switches to save Mary Jane added another fun layer of challenge to the battle as well, and ultimately this ended up being my favorite boss fight of the game. After beating Venom, we'll get a moment to talk to him and learn that this all could have been avoided had Eddie been more observant at the Science Expo.
Why, Venom? Why did you come back?
You should know, Spider-Man. The heist you pulled at the Science Expo. You're the bad guy this time.
You idiot! Think, Eddie. Think back to that day. I was with you in the crowd. An imposter Spider-Man was on stage. He burned both of us, and now we've been played against each other.
You're right, Parker.
Mary Jane!
I got you. You and your wife are innocent, Parker. Our bad.
Our bad? Our bad? I'm gonna kill
Peter
you!
Parker! Just get me out of here now!
Bummer. You're in the doghouse now, dude.
Coming, honey. So, we're partners, but only for now. After we bust those tech thieves, it's payback time for kidnapping my wife.
Jeez, one little mistake. We said we're sorry.
Yeah, whatever. Now, the imposter was a shapeshifter, so that means it was either Mysterio or the Chameleon.
Hey, Chameleon was our idea. We thought of that.
Tell me this, Einstein. Who could have wanted to steal Octavius' technology?
Ooh, we know!
Who?
The Submariner.
Submariner? Get serious, will you?
The mighty Thor.
Are you out of your mind? Don't answer that.
Galactus.
Forget it, Eddie. I need Jameson's help on this. We're going to the Bugle.
Jameson! We hate Jameson.
You bonehead. We're not going to see Jameson. We're going to use his computer database.
Ooh, are we gonna surf the web?
Let's just go, okay?
Venom mentions multiple characters here, some of which you've likely heard of, and a couple you might not have. As suspects to the crime of impersonating Spider-Man, there was the Chameleon, a master of disguise who's posed as Spider-Man in the comics as well, specifically in the first issue of Amazing Spider-Man. Also mentioned was Mysterio, a special effects artist and master illusionist. Venom also name-dropped Namor the Submariner, the ruler of Atlantis, who we'll actually discuss a bit later in the video. There was also Thor, the god of thunder, who I doubt needs further introduction. Then Venom's last theory was Galactus. Galactus is a powerful cosmic being who devours planets as his form of sustenance. Galactus also has heralds who scout planets for him, one of which was the Silver Surfer who we saw earlier on the blimp. In an attempt for more answers, Spider-Man decides to break into the Daily Bugle, but things don't go as smoothly as planned.
Parker, wait, could it be?
Could what?
Yes, we sense our other.
Who? Sense who?
It's our other, the symbiote known as Carnage. We must stop him.
Now?
Yes, now. We have no choice.
Great, make more noise. I'm only breaking and entering here. Spider sense tingling. Now what? Spidey, whoever's behind all this, got symbiotes.
Somehow, there are now a bunch of symbiote minions, all looking for human hosts within the Daily Bugle. So our next goal is to save the hostages and figure out where all these symbiotes are coming from. One hostage in particular had some interesting voice line differences between his normal mode and what if mode counterparts. In Event, an employee will ask you for help when you find him in normal mode.
Please help me. Please help me.
In what if mode, he's way more doom and gloom, leading to some much darker voice lines.
Game over, man. Game over. Kill me. Please kill me.
We still save him, so don't worry, he's totally fine. As we explore deeper into the Bugle though, we'll eventually find a really gross symbiote generator regularly producing more symbiotes. Destroying them becomes a top priority, so we'll hunt them down throughout the Bugle. I decided to do this as stealthily as possible because these symbiote enemy types are extremely strong. They have a lot of health, they can deal out a lot of damage, and excluding the web gloves, your webbing is pretty ineffective against them. Thankfully, we can find one of the most fun collectibles within this level to help us combat this, a magnesium modification that adds fire to our web fluid. Symbiotes are vulnerable against fire and sonics, so this flaming web fluid takes them out almost immediately, and is a joy to use. The symbiotes aren't the only threat here though, since the Bugle's printing presses are equally as deadly. But after burning our way through the upper levels of the Daily Bugle, we then drop into the basement to find more answers. While we're down here, we run into our imposter.
Hey! The imposter! The imposter! Why do they always run?
In hindsight, this is definitely a missed opportunity for the Spider-Man pointing meme, but what if mode has its own fun twist on this meeting.
Hey! The imposter! The imposter! Come back here!
This is meant to be a reference to the slow-mo action scenes of the Matrix movies, which released about a year before this game. Spider-Man eventually catches up to his imposter, and his true identity is finally revealed to be Mysterio.
At last, I will crush you once and for all! No, little spider, you will die!
Is it too late for us to be friends?
This leads to our boss fight against him, and I'd say this is the most ambitious boss fight in the game. There are multiple stories we can jump up and down from to attack Giant Mysterio, and our goal is to destroy the glowing nodes on his knees, hips, and shoulders. This is easier said than done though, since Mysterio has a variety of attacks and traps to damage you no matter where you are, such as spike wheels that roll around on each level. Mysterio can also grab you and throw you down to the bottom, which is very damaging and forces you to climb back up to him. Spider-Man will even make a joke about it with a King Kong reference.
Do I look like Fay Ray? Put me down!
Fay Ray was the actress who was held in the clutches of King Kong, so I thought that was a fun reference. Another fun inclusion is in What If mode, and when grabbed, you can get a look inside Mysterio's helmet, often made fun of as a fishbowl, and see that there's a goldfish swimming around inside of it. Once you've destroyed all the nodes though, the two shoulder nodes will recharge, now with the ability to shoot powerful lasers. Not only that, but the ground will become electrified, intermittently sending a damaging pulse that you need to leap over. This final phase was definitely the most challenging, with the lasers being especially difficult to react to. They're fast and they track you, and with Spider-Man's longer attack and recovery animations, it's not tough for Mysterio to tag you mid-attack, potentially even stun-locking you. So Mysterio is a very challenging opponent, and that challenge was further elevated by the sluggish controls. Since Mysterio has so many attacks that you have to avoid, you're reacting to a lot and looking for brief openings to attack, but unfortunately the controls weren't as responsive as I'd like for this type of battle. For example, firing a generic web line when I was trying to input a web bullet. Furthermore, trying to quickly position myself after dodging was a challenge too, with Spider-Man occasionally facing the wrong way as I'm trying to fire off attacks. On the surface, these don't really look like big issues and could even just be written off as user error, but I think they're elevated due to how challenging Mysterio is. You're dealing with a lot of attacks at once, all of which can be very damaging in a short amount of time, so little mistakes can feel very punishing, and much of it felt out of my control. This ended up being the most frustrating boss fight for those reasons, however, I think it had the potential to be an incredible battle with some extra fine-tuning. For example, had Mysterio's damage output been dialed back a bit, I think it might have felt more balanced, making it more forgiving, enjoyable, and allowing me to focus more on the cool features that it has to offer. Like I mentioned earlier, I think this is a very ambitious boss fight, and I think it was structured in a really cool way. I like that you have to scale different stories to reach Mysterio's various weak points, while also minding your surroundings as you evade his traps and attacks. It's a more fast-paced interaction, and I think it makes for an exciting boss fight. Mysterio's high damage output and the clunky PS1 controls diluted that experience, which is frustrating because even though I'd rate this as my least favorite boss fight, I think it absolutely had the potential to be my favorite. In fact, if this game ever got a remaster, this level would be the one I'd be most excited to try out. Continuing on though, after defeating Mysterio, Spider-Man interrogates him for information. Mysterio tells him of his employer's grand scheme of creating a symbiote invasion, and that the point of the gas cloud over the city was to prepare the citizens for symbiosis. With a little more persuasion, Mysterio also tells us where his employer's hideout is, which is a secret passage at Warehouse 65, so we head there next. On our way, we get another fun cameo.
I'm here, Frank. What's up?
Spider-Man's here, Microchip.
What range?
100 yards, maybe. Easy shot.
Very funny, Frank.
Huh? He spotted me, but how could he? I lost him.
What happened?
He took out my scope.
Hey, tough guy. Sorry about that expensive lens, Punisher.
Something tells me we have the same objective here. That's the place. Warehouse 65. We can team up. You cover my back.
Huh. No thanks, Mr. Death Wish. I'd like to keep the body count low if you don't mind.
It's very brief and honestly could have been cut if they wanted to, but it's always cool to see a cameo from Punisher. We even hear that he's communicating with someone named Microchip in the beginning, and Microchip is essentially Punisher's man in the chair, with an expertise in hacking and weaponry. Also, if Punisher seems like a random inclusion here, it's actually pretty true to the comics, since Punisher's first ever comic appearance was in an issue of Spider-Man. Once inside Warehouse 65, there's not too much out of the ordinary. We'll find more symbiote generators and destroy them, and eventually make our way through an air duct. However, in What If mode, there's another interesting Easter egg in this area. One of the crates has written text on it stating, "This envelope contains a genuine Marvel Comics No Prize which you have just won." This is a reference to a joke started by Stan Lee, where he would give a fake reward to readers who wrote in stating that they found continuity errors within the books. Lee would send them a no prize, which was essentially an envelope with that text on it, with nothing inside. What began as a joke on nitpickers ended up in high demand, with many readers writing in hopes of getting a no prize for themselves. Continuing through the warehouse, we'll eventually find a giant ventilation shaft, and Spidey will make another reference regarding it.
Whoa, where's Marilyn when you need her?
He's of course referring to the iconic photo of Marilyn Monroe having her skirt blown up by a vent. Don't tell MJ. Once at the bottom, we learn this dropped us a couple hundred feet underwater into a heavily fortified facility with electrified walls and ceilings, also protected by turrets. At first, I assumed that I needed to jump from platform to platform, destroying each turret, but after multiple deaths, I realized you're better off just making a run for it to the other side. The developers doubled down on this method in What If mode, where you're presented with a side challenge of racing a boat across this level.
Gotta be kidding.
Ahoy there, web slinger. Captain Jennings speaking. I designed this place. That's right, I built it. And now I want you to race me through it. So here's the skinny. If you can keep me in the trench, I'll tell you a secret. Deal? Ready when you are.
If you manage to beat him, you'll be rewarded with a cheat code for unlimited webbing, but more on that later. Up ahead, we'll find the main facility where the fog is being generated, so our next goal is to shut it down. Another task is soon added to our list though, as we enter the security room and find Black Cat imprisoned. This is where she was taken after the fake paramedics abducted her, so we'll have to shut down the power to free her. However, Black Cat's captivity is under much stranger circumstances in What If mode, as we find she's been drugged and can't stop dancing.
Spider-Man! I'm so happy to see you!
Black Cat, what are you doing? Who's behind this? Why are you dancing?
Your guess is as good as mine. The guys in the ambulance must have drugged me because the next thing I knew I woke up here and I can't stop dancing. You've got to get me out of here.
Okay, Kat, but how?
If you can somehow shut down the power, the music will stop and I can stop dancing.
You got it, Kat.
With Black Cat under the influence of a porno music boogie bomb, we need to find a solution fast, and thankfully it's in the next room.
If I read this right, this panel controls the exhaust ports. If I can jam the exhaust ports without stopping the flow of fog, it'll be like a banana in a tailpipe. That ought to blow the power, too.
Spider-Man's example is made literal in What If mode, where when flipping the switch, it's literally closed with bananas. During our interview, Chad told me this was a reference to a scene from Beverly Hills Cop. Plugging all the smokestacks causes the pipes to burst in the facility, and also releases Black Cat from containment. Spider-Man sends her to go find help, while he continues to search for the mastermind. His search takes him through the research facility, where he finally discovers who's truly behind all this. At the end of the hallway, Spider-Man is finally greeted by the mastermind, who you've likely already guessed is Dr. Octopus. He hopes to partner with the symbiote to further his villainous schemes, although to be honest, the specifics are still a bit murky to me. Regardless, Venom phases in by our side and decides to even the odds by handling Carnage for us. That leaves us with Dr. Octopus, and we're on to our next boss fight. Ock has hidden himself behind an energy barrier, but still lashes out with tentacle attacks as we run around the arena. Occasionally, a switch will drop down that diverts power from his shield, but also creates a barricade in our path. Each time we hit the switch, an additional barrier emerges, making it harder to avoid Ock's attacks. After hitting the switch a fourth time, it'll short circuit and leave him vulnerable. We'll continue this pattern a few more times before finally defeating Dr. Octopus. Before moving on though, let's look at the what if version of this battle, because it's pretty wild. As soon as it begins, you feel like you're experiencing a bad LSD trip, seeing tons of bright colors and imagery of smiley faces with sunglasses. As you can see, it's mental, and makes it a bit hard to focus on the battle itself. Thankfully, Dr. Octopus seems to have been hit with Pym particles, and is much tinier compared to normal mode. This also means his tentacles can't reach you, which makes this boss fight much easier. On a side note, you might also be asking yourself who Dr. Love is in the background. In our interview, Chad told me Dr. Love was producer Kevin Mulhall, and that Chad originally included him in the game without Kevin's knowledge. Unfortunately, Chad can't recall if there's an inside joke for it, but it's still a pretty funny Easter egg given this context. After defeating Ock, the last remaining enemy is Carnage. Before we get a chance to check on Venom, he's launched into the room, clearly losing the fight. Spider-Man is then yanked into the room with Carnage, beginning our next boss battle. As the fight begins, we'll notice in the center of the room is a sonic bubble, coincidentally, one of the two major weaknesses of a symbiote. Our goal for this fight is to find a way to push Carnage into it, but that's easier said than done. Like we discussed earlier, Carnage is a deadly and ruthless opponent, which we can see in his attacks. Carnage's symbiote can form itself into different weapons, such as morphing his hands into blades to hack away at us, or by turning pieces of his symbiote into razor-sharp throwing stars. Carnage is deadly at any distance, and honestly, pretty scary to go up against. Getting him into the sonic bubble can be tricky too, and I usually knew I was going to have to just absorb a hit in order to get an opportunity to push him in. This was another challenging boss fight, but I had a lot of fun with it. It was scary trying to keep my distance from Carnage, and it was satisfying throwing him into the sonic bubble before trying to get as much damage on him as I could in that window. Like with the other levels though, it's further enhanced in What If mode, where there are extra inclusions. To start, during the fight, if you look out the window, off in the distance you can see Namor the Submariner watching you fight. Another fun difference is that some of Carnage's voice lines are voiced by a different actor during this fight. In normal mode, D. Bradley Baker voices Carnage and gives a wonderfully maniacal performance.
Bet you weren't expecting that! Here I come! Nice try!
In What If mode, the team at Neversoft decided it would be funny to have a child voice some of these lines, so Joel Jewett's son also voiced Carnage in this mode.
Come back here, Spider-Man! Come here! Come here! Don't kill my best friend! I bet you weren't expecting that! You may have defeated everyone else, but you won't defeat me! Nice try!
A child's voice for Carnage is both cute and funny, but also somehow more terrifying. But after beating Carnage, the symbiote leaves Cletus Cassidy and slithers away. All is well, and Spidey has successfully saved the day. Oh shit!
What the? Is that Hawk?
This horrifying creature is known as Monster Ock and was an original creation for the game. He's also truly terrifying, and our goal is to just run away from him as the building self-destructs. Running away was my immediate impulse anyway, because not only is Monster Ock visually terrifying, but the sounds he makes are absolutely nightmarish. I'm not sure if it's as scary watching it on screen, but the feeling of playing this level was so hair-raising. Like shutting all the lights off in your house and running to the bedroom before the ghost can get you, feeling like they're about to grab you at any moment, kinda scary. I also like how Spider-Man is so paranoid that he's about to get caught, that he goes full meta to tell you what buttons to push to get him out of there.
The vent goes up here. I need to press R1 to zip line up quickly.
Surprisingly, this was a scenario where I think the wonky controls actually helped by adding to the terror. As you attempt to flee Monster Ock, you'll constantly run into walls and zip to areas you weren't aiming for, giving Ock more time to close in on you. I doubt it was intentional for these inaccuracies to add to the tension, but it definitely worked to elevate my fear as I ran from him. It's also a pretty lengthy chase sequence, giving you time to stew in the tension. Overall, I thought this was a really great, memorable chase sequence and a solid way to end the game. So as we reach the end of the facility, Ock is a little too slow and gets caught in the explosion. The Carnage symbiote slithers away, and Spider-Man retrieves Octavius to take him into custody. However, they're essentially trapped on an island now, but some friends arrive just in time to help. There's some pretty fun cameos in these final cutscenes, so I'll let these play out.
It's a good thing Black Cat gave me a call, son.
Looks like just in time.
Hey, Spidey, can you get us Captain America's autograph?
Oh, brother. Punisher, do you have any threes?
Go fish. So, nice of you to join us for once, Spidey.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was out saving the world. Beating you guys at cards ought to be pretty easy.
Your spider sense won't save you here.
Look who's talking, Daredevil. You've been looking at my cards all night.
I don't need to look at your cards, Punisher. Your bluffs are so obvious. Okay. Let's keep this a nice, friendly, clean game.
Ugh. Who keeps inviting this guy?
Hey, will you guys keep it down?
Hey, loosen up, kids! I'm on fire!
Wait, hold on. Time out. All of you guys were working together, and you still couldn't take down Spider-Man?
It's not my fault. Doc Ock's plan was horrible. Everyone knows you can't control the symbiote.
Hey, wait! So, I'm a rhino, you're a scorpion, and he's an octopus. What's a Mysterio?
So, Rhino, you got any threes?
Hey! Hey, I got a bingo! Ha ha! You guys think you're so smart, but I won! Ha! Who's your daddy, Doc Ock? Ha ha ha! Victory is mine! You're always laughing at me, but who's crying now, huh? Ha 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 ha! Wait a minute, I made a mistake.
It's really great seeing all these characters show up for one final cutscene at the end, and I like some of the little details around the rooms. For example, Daredevil drinking something called superhero juice, or the bandages around Mysterio's helmet. The best one, of course, is the photo Mysterio has taped up on a wall behind him of a model with a fishbowl on her head, as if he's only attracted to other people with fishbowl helmets. Not counting the helmet, the photo is actually a real one, and it's of the female wrestler Sable. I also want to mention the end ? Text on screen as the game ends. This game was successful and did receive a sequel called Enter Electro, but it wasn't made by Neversoft.
Up to a certain point, we wanted to do a sequel, and then I can't remember when Joel gave us like, hey, we gotta move to PlayStation 2 and Tony Hawk, because like we had one Tony Hawk game come out and then another one started, and like during this entire process, Tony Hawk was like, oh my god, this is gonna be amazing. This is our and like I was just glad that we got a chance to work on Spidey, because like that was a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I was fine with like he said we got to move to PlayStation 2. We need like all hands on deck for this. So we're not Spidey 2. You know, and it's done a little bit, but not like, I mean, I was just glad to have worked on it.
I asked Chad if they originally had plans to make a sequel and why they chose to include this end text.
So I think the question mark probably was more for like, I just wanted to make sure another Spidey game got done by somebody. Because I thought, like, you know, we did a good first pass at it. Like, all right, somebody else, please continue this thing, you know?
It's unfortunate that Chad and the rest of the team at Neversoft didn't get to continue on with another Spider-Man game, but I am thankful that Chad thought ahead and left the door open for a sequel, allowing Vicarious Visions to jump in and continue the story. Even though Chad is very proud of the game that he and his team made together, I did ask him if there were any sections that didn't make it into the game that he wished he had been able to include, and he describes one boss fight in particular.
Yeah, Vulture was one. That was like, he was on the list right up until like probably 6 months before we shipped. And my boss, I'm pretty sure he knew what he was doing at the time, but he said, hey, if you can get all of this stuff done by this date, I'll let you get them in. And I think he knew there was no way we'd get them done, but I was like, you know what, that's fine. That's a good way to do it, you know? And so we just couldn't make it. And I'm glad, because we had no flying enemies, and trying to add a flying enemy at the last like couple months of the game would have been a nightmare. So
yeah. Did you have an idea of what that level would even look like?
It was just gonna be on a bridge, and like I think like Spidey trying to like web sling cars at him or something. I can't, you know. But that was all like the big picture idea. What we, you know, who knows what it really would have turned into.
Had they been able to include Vulture, that boss fight sounds really unique and ambitious, and could have been a really cool battle. It's a shame that both Vulture and Lizard were cut, but as it stands, the game we received was very solid. Even though the controls haven't aged particularly well, progressing through the game was an absolute joy, primarily because it's so authentic to the comics. You can tell this game was made by fans for fans, so it's no wonder why it's regarded as a classic, since it exudes so much comic book charm. Not only just from all the different cameo appearances from superheroes and the little Easter eggs placed in the levels, but also by the superb writing. Surprisingly, this game didn't even have a specified writing team and was instead a very collaborative effort.
Hugely collaborative. We had someone named Margaret Stoll come in to pitch some ideas for us. She did like the Beautiful Creatures series of books with someone. And she gave us some initial ideas to ping off of, but mostly it was like just like 5 to 7 of us at Neversoft, like sitting down day after day after day. I had like a checklist of things I wanted to happen, you know, like the trail and the cops going after Spidey, and like, you know, like an enemy turns to a friend, like just kind of things that I got from the Spider-Man comics that I thought were very like true to Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And then I the characters, like the main ones and the secondary ones and the maybes. And we just started to work together on like getting to like, you know, an outline of like what a good story would be that fit Spidey. And then once we got to an outline, then a good buddy of mine, Christian Gossett, he's a comic book writer and artist, and he's actually done some TV and movie storyboarding and directing and writing. He was the guy that invented the double-sided lightsaber for the Star Wars franchise. He came in and storyboarded the entire cutscene set for us and wrote all the dialogue for the cutscenes. And then I worked with the designers to write all the dialogue for all the in-game stuff based on the outlines that we did.
Overall, I think everyone involved with the writing did an excellent job, since the story and dialogue were some of my favorite aspects of this game. I can't say that I followed everything that was happening in the narrative perfectly as it went, but I don't feel like I needed to. Above all, this is a fun story that's meant to feel like you're playing through a comic book, and it pulls that off perfectly. I think they managed to write story and dialogue that captures the heart of the Spider-Man character, while infusing that story with elements from the wider Marvel universe. All of that was further enhanced by the brilliant inclusion of What If mode, which amplified my enjoyment of the game immensely. Finding all the wacky changes was so fun, and I enjoyed all the random Marvel Easter eggs it included as well. So ultimately, I was very happy with the various story elements in this game, and I found it to be a real joy to experience. But I think that wraps up my thoughts on the story, so now I'd like to explore the gameplay as well as some of the additional side content within the game. Let's start with some of the side content you can play outside of the story, beginning with the training mode. In here, you're given 5 different challenges you can play, and they're about what you'd expect. Things like a survival challenge where you try to defeat as many enemies as you can for a high score, or more traversal-based challenges like swinging to the end of a room as quickly as you can. There are a couple that I want to focus on in particular though, because of the Easter eggs within them. The first one is item collection, where you have to run around a room and collect all the coins as quickly as possible. However, there's also a secret room that you can find within this mission, which is a hideout belonging to the villain Kraven the Hunter. Kraven is a master hunter who sees Spider-Man as the ultimate prey, so he aims to kill Spider-Man to prove himself. Inside the room you can find various weapons like rifles and swords, and you can also find animal pelts as well as crates with the text, "Property of Sergei Kravenov," written on them. Sergei Kravenov being the real name of Kraven the Hunter. There are also multiple screens with Spider-Man on them, suggesting that Kraven has been watching Spider-Man for some time, and the hunt is soon to commence. The other challenge I want to discuss is target practice. In this one, you can practice your web aim as you run through a shooting gallery filled with comic book characters. Some are enemies and some are friends, so you have to be careful not to hit your friends or else you'll incur a penalty. This is a pretty fun mode by itself, but as you can see, there are a ton of comic book characters here that aren't in the main game. In fact, I played this multiple times and continued to see new characters emerge that I hadn't previously. Earlier, I played a clip where Chad mentioned how they wanted to throw in as many of their Marvel-approved character lists as they could, and it seems this is the mode where everyone was thrown in. Just so you can get a sense of the wide range of characters, I'll name off a few examples. There's Morbius the Living Vampire, Invisible Woman, Jack-O-Lantern, Doctor Strange, Green Goblin, Hobgoblin, and Doctor Doom, just to name a few. That list goes on for quite a while, but I think you get the point. This is a mode with a ton of comic book references, and it's a lot of fun to run through multiple times to see who shows up. For comic fans, it's also sort of a fun test to see how many characters you can recognize, and whether you can spot friend or foe, which I thought was cool too. This game also had a good amount of collectibles, all of which can be viewed in the gallery. For example, a character viewer, which not only allows you a better look at each character's model, but also gives details on each one, like their abilities and first appearance. Even better though is that Stan Lee gives a brief introduction to each character when you select them.
An Avenger and an icon to people everywhere, Captain America is the definition of a true hero. The Lizard, product of a twisted experiment gone wrong. Frank Castle fights the seedy side of the world as the Punisher, with a vigilante-style justice.
Namor the Submariner is even viewable here, which is cool since we can only see him at a distance during the Carnage fight. Unfortunately, Stan doesn't have any commentary on him. There's also a character model for Neversoft studio head Joel James Jewett, which is a pretty funny inclusion. For reference, you can see Joel Jewett during that old interview with him and Chad, and due to his initials being all J's, you can even enter a cheat code to replace J. Jonah Jameson with Joel Jewett during the Scorpion boss fight. Another collectible in the game are comic book covers, which can be found as you explore each level. After finding one, you can return to the gallery and view your collected comic covers, and also read details about each issue. I thought these were both fun to find and examine, so I'm glad they were included in the game. Also interesting to look at are storyboards, where you can see the original sketches for the cutscenes prior to them being developed. Easily the most exciting collectibles though are the alternate outfits, and there's a solid number of them. I also like that each outfit has an ability in the game, often thematic to its comic book counterpart. For example, the symbiote Spider-Man suit provides you with unlimited webbing. In the comics and in the game, Peter has to use web cartridges that he developed and doesn't have organic webbing. However, when Spider-Man acquired the symbiote suit in the comics, the symbiote was able to produce its own organic webbing for him, an ability it carried over for Eddie Brock as Venom. Unlimited webbing is very powerful in this game, and it's especially fun during levels where you can collect magnesium upgrades for it, essentially becoming the Human Torch. Another suit is Spider-Man 2099, a Spider-Man in the future named Miguel O'Hara. In the game, the 2099 suit doubles your damage. There's also the Captain Universe outfit. In the comics, a cosmic energy known as the Unipower or Enigma Force will seek out those in need and temporarily bond with them, granting them immense power, making them Captain Universe. Spider-Man received this suit during the Acts of Vengeance event, enhancing his strength while also giving him the ability to control cosmic energy and fly. In the game, it grants you invulnerability, enhanced strength, and unlimited webbing, so pretty much God mode. There's also Spider-Man Unlimited, which is based on the television series of the same name. In it, Spider-Man ends up in space on Counter-Earth, attempting to find astronaut John Jameson. Voice actor Reno Romano voices Spider-Man in that show, and he's also the voice of Spider-Man in this game. More on Reno a bit later. In the game, the suit gives you a stealth mode ability, allowing you to turn invisible whenever you like. The next outfit is the Amazing Bagman. This suit is based on a moment in the comics where Spider-Man let Reed Richards experiment on his symbiote suit. When Reed tells him that the suit is alive, Peter immediately removes it and leaves it with Reed for further analysis. This left Peter without a suit and mask though, so Johnny Storm found an old Fantastic Four suit for him to wear and a paper bag to conceal his identity. Using the suit in this game actually puts you at a disadvantage though, since you no longer have a Spidey utility belt to store web cartridges, so you can only hold a maximum of 2 at a time. so this suit is for those looking for an added challenge. Another outfit is Scarlet Spider-Man, and as the game text describes, this suit was worn by Peter Parker clone Ben Reilly. He actually named himself that in honor of Aunt May and Uncle Ben, taking Ben as his first name and then Reilly because that's May's maiden name. In the game, this outfit provides no additional gameplay changes, making it a good alternate outfit for a normal playthrough. The next suit is another Ben Reilly suit, the one he wore after taking over for Peter Parker as Spider-Man when Peter decided to retire. Like with the Scarlet Spider outfit, you won't be given any changes to gameplay by using it. There's also the Quick Change Spidey suit. Peter wore this briefly when all he had available was remnants of an old black spider costume. It's a basic outfit, but admittedly it still looks pretty awesome. Like the Bagman suit, this one also limits how many web cartridges you can hold, making it another suit that you'd wear for an added challenge. And if you'd like to forgo your secret identity entirely, you can simply play as Peter Parker, and since he doesn't have a utility belt here either, this is another Spidey suit you'd be playing at a disadvantage. Overall though, I really like this selection of outfits, and I really love that they have different thematic gameplay changes tied to them. I also like that these gameplay changes can vary the difficulty depending on how much easier or harder you want your next playthrough to be. I also appreciate that some outfits have no gameplay changes if you just want to play the game normally but with a new appearance. I also like that you can further alter these suits and their abilities a bit by inputting cheats, such as unlimited webbing or invincibility. However, I do wish you had the ability to enable or disable certain abilities tied to a specific suit. For example, if you wanted to wear the Captain Universe outfit for a normal playthrough and not God mode. Still, I like the options in the game and I'm glad Neversoft added these alternate outfits for fans. Since I've mentioned it a couple times now, we should probably look at the cheat code menu, which is how you'll access a lot of the content we've described so far, such as What If mode and some of the costumes. A cheat we haven't looked at yet though is Big Head mode, which is just as goofy as you'd expect. However, I was a bit disappointed that the Big Head didn't extend to the enemies in the game and only applied to Spider-Man. Within the cheat menu itself is another fun feature, and it's that you can piss off Spider-Man by inserting swear words. When you do so, he'll pop up and punch your input, changing it to something wholesome. There are also some cool details if you go inactive for a short time. If you leave or don't push any buttons while in the menu, little gameplay demo clips will play. One of them is a nod to the classic gun barrel sequence from James Bond movies, where Bond shoots the screen. Spider-Man will replicate this, as a circular cutout follows him as he crawls on the walls. At the end, Spider-Man will climb down and fire a web bullet at the screen. The next thing I want to briefly mention isn't a feature of the game, but still something I found to be really interesting in relation to it. So after the game's release and prior to the 2002 movie game, Activision decided it wanted to provide a game demo to promote the upcoming 2002 movie game. To accomplish this, they gave out free demo discs in Kellogg cereal boxes. However, the strange thing is that instead of providing an actual demo of that game, they instead modded the PC port of Neversoft Spider-Man game and swapped Spider-Man's classic suit with the movie suit. It's really strange and probably false advertising, but it's funny nonetheless. If you'd like to see more on it, I'd recommend a video by Chris Baker on the subject, since he goes into much more detail on it, and I'll have that linked in the description. But to sum up my thoughts on the side content and gameplay of Neversoft Spider-Man, they were areas that I was really pleased with. The controls and overall gameplay haven't aged all that great, but at its core, this is still a very solid game. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, I was surprised at the depth of the combat and especially the versatility of the webbing. I also liked how each level felt different from the next, both visually and from a gameplay perspective. For example, the first few missions get you accustomed to basic combat, wall crawling, and web swinging, then the sewers give you more advanced challenges for each of those aspects while also introducing you to puzzles like flipping switches and navigating a maze. I liked the challenge progression of each mission, and I liked how they all managed to stand on their own. I also liked the challenge progression of basic enemies as the game continued, and I think the boss fights were an especially strong area of the game. I know I had some gripes with Mysterio, but like I said, I like the structure of that fight, and the same goes for the rest of the boss fights, since each one felt unique and required different tactics from the others, such as taunting Rhino to run into hazardous areas of the environment, utilizing webbing and ranged attacks against Scorpion, adapting quickly to Venom's phasing while protecting Mary Jane, the platforming challenges of Mysterio, throwing Carnage into a sonic bubble, etc. The boss fights on the surface are relatively simple, but they were still very well constructed and enjoyable for the most part. So I think the gameplay overall is very strong, and it feels like Neversoft put a lot of thought into how they were crafting each mission and enemy. I also appreciate that Neversoft attempted to inject a lot of replay value into the game. What If mode is the biggest one, and a huge reason to play through the game a second time. I really can't praise enough how much I love this mode. The normal story is great, but you can feel how much fun the Neversoft team was having when adding things into What If mode. All those additions make it such a fun and unique experience, and it quickly became my favorite part of the game. Then with the different training modes, collectibles, and cheats, you have a lot of content to mess around with, and I was very pleased with what the game collectively had to offer. The sound design is another great strength of the game, with some great compositions for each level and a solid voice cast. Even though this game isn't associated directly with any animated series, there are some voice actors from the shows who provide their voice for their characters. To start, Spider-Man is voiced by Reno Romano, who voices Spidey in the short-lived Spider-Man Unlimited animated series. The show only ran for one season, and saw Spider-Man launch into space in an attempt to save John Jameson. Overall, I like Reno's voice as Spider-Man, and I think he fits well into the game. Outside of Neversoft Spider-Man, there are a couple other roles you may know him from. For example, he voices Bruce Wayne in the Batman animated series.
Hello, Dick. I'm Bruce Wayne. I'm sorry about your loss.
He also voiced Louise Sarah in the original Resident Evil 4.
Okay, I have only one very important question. You got a smoke?
There's also Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., who voices Dr. Octopus in the game, reprising his role as Octavius from Spider-Man the Animated Series.
I can't let you and Mrs. Hardy take all the credit for my invention.
We both worked on it, Otto.
Pingree, you are merely my assistant. And as for Mrs. Hardy, she owes me a debt that I've come to collect.
Ephraim does a great job as Dr. Octopus, but he's also known for voicing Alfred in Batman the Animated Series.
Imagine that, sir.
Huh? What?
Someone dressed up in a frightening costume, running around scaring people. What will they think of next?
Another returning member from Spider-Man the Animated Series is Jennifer Hale, reprising her role as Black Cat.
I knew you'd come, Spider.
Who are you?
Just a stray black cat.
Jennifer has had a very successful career as a voice actress with a lot of roles on her resume. Sticking to the Marvel theme though, you may also recognize her as Maria Hill from Marvel's Avengers, Pepper Potts in Marvel's Iron Man VR, or most recently as Lilith in Marvel's Midnight Suns. As I mentioned a couple times in the video, there's also D. Bradley Baker voicing Carnage. I've really loved his interpretation of Carnage since it's so maniacal and unhinged, which is perfect for Carnage. D. Baker is no stranger to comic book games either, since he's also voiced Nightcrawler in both X-Men Legends games and Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1, but more notably, he's also voiced Ra's al Ghul in Batman Arkham City and Knight. Another fun symbiote voice actor is Darren Norris, who voices Venom in the game. In my opinion, Venom had some of the best and most memorable lines in this game, which is a credit both to Darren's performance and the writing.
Surf the web, surf the web.
Shut up, Brock, we don't have time.
However, Darren wouldn't really go on to voice Venom more after this game, and instead voiced Jameson on a couple of occasions, such as in the Spectacular Animated Series and in Spider-Man Web of Shadows, a game that I plan on covering before long as part of our Symbiote series. Outside of that, you may also recognize Darren's work in The Fairly OddParents, where he voices Cosmo and Mr. Turner.
Must win race, Philip, Nickel. There's chocolate in the road. Look out, Philip!
That's me graduating Dictator College. And this is me taking over the world with smiles. And this is where I'd put a trophy. If I had one! Sorry, lost the happy. But the happy's back!
Chad Findley actually voices a character in the game too, as the pilot who gets shot down by the Jade Syndicate.
New York City Police Department, cease and desist at once. Lay down your arms and prepare to...
There's of course also Stan Lee, who provides his voice throughout the game. I only played his opening monologue from the game in this video, but he pops up somewhat regularly to introduce different levels.
Boy, Spidey fans, Black Cat is out! Rhino's looking to take Spidey down as well.
It's always a joy to hear Stan's voice in these games, and he gets a significant amount of voice lines in it, further adding to the authentic comic book feel.
Uh-oh, Spidey. Scorpions had it out for old J. Jonah Jameson from day one, blaming Jameson for being stuck in his scorpion suit. Spidey had better get there quickly, or JJJ may end up in the obituaries of his own paper.
I also want to discuss the music in the game, composed by Tommy Tallarico and Howard Uliate. Together, they put together some pretty badass tracks for this game. None of the tracks felt out of place in their levels either, and provided some great atmosphere. To start, here's a great upbeat track as you evade the attack chopper.
I'm already at full health.
Here's another favorite of mine from these sewer levels, which provides some nice, creepy atmosphere, but also has a nice tempo for combat. This next one will hopefully be a bit nostalgic if you played the game, and it's the track that plays as you traverse the city to reach Jameson before Scorpion kills him. It's another awesome, fast tempo track that really gets you in the zone to race through the city. I was surprised at just how good the soundtrack was for this game, and it's definitely worth a listen if you're curious. To end off this section though, I'll play one more nostalgic one, and that's the main menu song. Neversoft Spider-Man is often looked back on as a classic by many fans, including myself. It's now over 20 years old, so replaying it again for this video, I was curious to see how it still held up, and whether it's as much of a classic as I remember it being. I was pleasantly surprised to find that it more than holds up to that title, and replaying it again only made me love it more. This game has a lot of charm, and really captures that genuine comic book feel. That, at its core, makes this game such an enjoyable experience to play through. It's clear that everyone working on this game had fun and that there was a passion for the Spider-Man character and a motivation to really bring the comics to life. So it's no surprise that when I asked Chad what he's most proud of with this game, it's the authenticity that he mentions.
It really is that like most of the time when you think about a comic book, and even back then, like, you know, like bringing comics to other media, like mediums, like they tend to change them in a way that's not true to the comics quite often.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not want to do that at all. I wanted it to be like, this is like straight from the pages of comic books, in every way possible. And like, I was just super proud that I felt like we did a pretty good job, like really being true to like what a Spider-Man comic it is like what a Spidey character is like, what the you know, the enemy characters are like, you know, everything. Like, I just try to be as true as possible, and I think we did a pretty good job with that. I'm really just happy about that, and people liked it, you know.
I think this game feels even more special now, since so many modern comic book games focus a lot on the movie portrayals of these characters, since that's how most fans know them now. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because you want to appeal to multiple audiences and different fans, but as a side effect, the comic book portrayals can often feel sidelined in favor of the movie ones. So for a game to go all in on the comics, it's really a unique experience. So if you're a fan of Spider-Man's early comics, I think you would enjoy playing through this game again. This game has a lot of heart, and I'm really glad I was able to revisit it for this video. I'm also really thankful that I was able to sit down with Chad Findley to discuss the game, so thank you again, Chad, for taking the time to talk with me, because hearing your insights into the game made me appreciate it even more. One of my final questions to Chad was whether or not he'd ever consider working on a remaster for the game, and he seems receptive to the idea, but under the right circumstances, namely the team involved.
I've never worked with a better team than that Neversoft team that I worked with, like, throughout. Like, you know, Joel was very cautious about getting people who are really good at what they're doing, but also collaboratively, like, you know, educated, so that, like, you know, you work as a team. You know, you always say, like, you gotta look left and look right, and like know that like everybody else is working just as hard as you and works, you know, is working with you. And that team was amazing. And like, so if you have the right team, any game can be challenging, but it can get done well.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the hard part, is putting together that team. And so if you don't have the right team, it's not worth, like, you know, even get into the discussion with. And so it just depends on who that they is. You know, if the they was a great team, yeah, hell, I'd do it again. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's pretty tough to get that they working on a remaster.
It may not be incredibly likely, but I'd personally love to see this game remastered, because I think it's an experience that deserves a revitalization, and I think it'd be a fun one for a new generation of fans to experience. If not a remaster or a remake, I think it could even work as a VR port, since the controls are simplistic and the web swinging wouldn't be nauseating. I'm mostly hoping to speak this into existence, because this is an experience I'd love to revisit again on modern hardware. But as it stands, this is still a tremendous game and stands up to the title of the classic Spider-Man game. If I had to score it, I think I'd give it a 9 out of 10, since it's overall a really enjoyable experience, but with a slight amount of jankiness, but still an overall upper tier Spider-Man experience. But I think that sums up my thoughts on Neversoft's Spider-Man game. So next, let's look at what you can expect in the future on this channel. In honor of the upcoming Guardians of the Galaxy movie, we'll next look at the recent Guardians of the Galaxy game, developed by Eidos Montreal. So keep an eye out for that coming up next. After that though, I plan on returning back to Spider-Man for Insomniac's Spider-Man. With the sequel potentially releasing later this year, I think it's a great time to finally revisit the first game and analyze everything that it has to offer. After that, I'd like to continue on with the Symbiote series with games like Web of Shadows, Spider-Man 3, and Ultimate Spider-Man. In the meantime though, I also have plenty of other Spider-Man retrospectives if you're in a Spider-Man mood, specifically on the Shattered Dimensions and Edge of Time games, which are great if you're also looking for Spider-Verse style stories. I'm also expanding my social media reach, so you'll now be able to find me on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter if you'd like to see more from me. You can also join us on Discord if you'd like to discuss all things superhero with myself and other fans. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.